Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as we are now going to be giving the top 10 teams in the NFL heading into week 4. Maybe in future reference here, we'll be doing a full 32. But as for today, I just wanted to look at the very top of the league and talk about who sort of remains a few weeks into this season. Now, coming in at number 10, I have the New York Jets. The Jets are a team that I have not been extremely high on headed into the season, that I was and still am to some degree skeptical about what level of play we can get from Aaron Rodgers. Not in the fact that he is going to be hurting this team ever mentally, which is sort of the big thing for the Jets considering where they've been at these past couple seasons, considering the fact that they have had a lot of inexperience at the position, and then you get, I believe Rodgers is probably the oldest quarterback in the NFL at this point, and he's not going to make mistakes for you. He is going to provide a certain level of play just with his mind alone that I think can be a steadying force in this Jets offense. And the biggest thing I saw from last week to this week was the increased level of mobility from Rodgers, that he was willing to break out and scramble on a couple occasions, even taking the ball himself upfield or just making throws on the run. That was something I was really worried about. He sort of looked like a statue to me in those first 2 games, but this is a very talented roster as a whole. If Aaron Rodgers is able to hold it down for them, I think that they are capable, with that defense living up to expectations, of beating just about anybody in the NFL. Number 9, I have the Green Bay Packers. They're in a situation where I feel like a lot of people still aren't really all that hot on them. And of course, the injury to Jordan Love early in the year played a big factor in this. But you can just see the talent from the roster and the talent from a coaching perspective with these past 2 wins, where they have stayed alive with Jordan Love on the bench, Malik Willis playing for them. And again, it's a situation where, is it more so about Malik Willis is way better than people expected? Yes, definitely, at least to some degree. But also, it's just the fact that Matt LaFleur continues to overcome whatever obstacles are in his way, where they lose Devontae Adams coming into last season, and they end up having a number of different wide receivers that they feel like they can rely on. You lose Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love steps in, and he is able to sort of navigate the entire offense. I think they run a pretty quarterback-friendly offense, and Jordan Love is very talented as well, so he takes advantage of it. But now you remove him from the picture, and they still have all of these weapons. I love what I've seen from Josh Jacobs the past couple weeks as well. I do think that he's still in that top 10 running backs in the NFL list. And this is a situation where I think it sounds like Jordan Love is going to return to play this upcoming week. Especially if that is the case, I think the Packers are only going to continue to climb in these coming weeks with Jordan Love at the helm. I have them at number 9 currently. Number 8, I have the Houston Texans. They get knocked down a couple pegs after this past week of being demolished by the Minnesota Vikings. I don't think that this is any sort of an indictment on CJ Stroud. I thought Stroud actually played pretty well, all things considered, but you got an excellent, defensive coaching performance on the other end from the Minnesota Vikings. The way that they were just able to wreck the backfield and the running game all day long. The offensive line, I feel like, had one of its worst performances while CJ Stroud has been under center. We talked about this earlier this week. Laramie Tunsil, their star left tackle, he had 5 penalties. You look at Shaq Mason as well, a former Pro Bowler that really seemed to struggle in this game as well. I think it was more uncharacteristic and a little bit more of an outlier. Plus as well the fact that Minnesota is a very good defense. So, I think that ultimately the Texans are still very much in the hunt in the AFC. Maybe you can say that CJ Stroud isn't quite, superstar Josh Allen level enough to the point where he's able to create with his legs as well and sort of operate under that chaos. But I think CJ Stroud is more than capable, and I am definitely not, souring on him by any means. But I have the Texans at number 8. Number 7, I have the San Francisco 49ers. And, this is a team that, for whatever it's worth, played the Vikings a little bit closer than the Texans did in the past couple weeks. Not that that's the way that you can operate these lists, but the 49ers, I think, are one of the most talented teams. I would say that they are the second most talented team when they are fully healthy. Now, the issue is that they're very injured right now, and they aren't healthy. And Christian McCaffrey is currently in Germany seeking treatment. So, not a great sign there. You have a situation where George Kittle, it sounds like he is returning to practice. Not sure if he's going to be able to play. Deebo Samuel, I don't believe, is expected to play this upcoming weekend either. And I think they're very worn down currently from an injury perspective. But on the bright side, Brock Purdy showed that he doesn't necessarily need a bunch of star players around him to be a successful quarterback in the NFL. Now, yes, they lost obviously against the Rams, ended up blowing that lead, but I think that was a little bit more about the Rams and about specifically Matthew Stafford reminding people who they are. I don't have the Rams on this top 10 list, but if you're talking about top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL, I definitely think that's where Stafford sort of reinserts his name. They are way too injury decimated for me to be able to slide them into this area. But all that being said, I thought that Brock Purdy was pretty good. 22 of 30, 292 yards, 3 touchdowns. I understand right now they're a little bit weaker than they typically are. That's why I have them at 7 as opposed to in that top 5, top 3 range. But they are still going to be a very competitive team moving forward here. And once they get fully healthy, I think they're only going to be better. Number 6, I have the Baltimore Ravens, another 1-2 team here. I feel like last week they sort of reestablished their identity, which is running the ball, where we looked at the stats specifically earlier this week. It was something along the lines of 45 runs to 15 passes. I can double check that on the fly here, but I think that's what this should be about for the Ravens, where they don't need to necessarily, 45 rush attempts to 15 pass attempts. And I think that is the recipe for success for this Ravens team, is you bring in Derrick Henry. No, maybe he's not, the MVP candidate Derrick Henry that he was years ago, but he is still very capable of being a workhorse. He just does not seem to age necessarily. And I thought the other, very big sign for them was the fact that their offensive line, their starting 5, first time they all played every single snap for them offensively. Nate Wiggins, who had his ups and downs in this game, covering CeeDee Lamb, that'll happen to a young cornerback, but that their secondary looked better. I know there is some concern about, can this team actually close games? I look at it as they had one possession that did not go their way in the fourth quarter where they go 3-0. That's a tough look for them, but an onside kick is recovered in that span as well. And when the Ravens had to, when their backs were against the wall, they were able to close out the game. And it was Lamar Jackson through the air, passing it to Zay Flowers for a huge third down conversion. Then he picked up another first down with his legs basically to end the game. So I think that the Ravens are back on track and they are still one of the best teams in the NFL. I have them at 6. Number 5, I have the Philadelphia Eagles. My issue with the Eagles has nothing to do with the roster and more so to do with the coaching there. Now, I have said I think that their defense can be a weakness, but you do look at sort of the players that are stepping up from them on that defensive side of the ball, specifically in the front 7, where Zach Bond continues to have an incredible season. Milton Williams is having a breakout year as well from that D-line, along with the likes of a Carter and, the other guys they have on that front line that I think that the Eagles are in a very good position moving forward here. Again, as long as Sirianni sort of stays out of the way. But you talk about talent for talent, the Eagles are up there with anybody. And they're another team that I think they found their new offensive identity, which is run the ball. Jalen Hurts really struggling up to this point in the year, in my opinion. And Saquon Barkley is an animal. So I think that they're going to lean more into that in the coming weeks. And I do think that they are a top 5 team in the NFL as things currently stand. Number 4, the Minnesota Vikings. I understand it's a situation where I don't know if I consider the Vikings legitimate Super Bowl contenders, but they are playing as well as anybody else in the NFL right now. They have 2 legitimately good wins against San Francisco and against Houston this past weekend. And top to bottom, I mean, this is a complete roster and one of the best coached teams, I might add as well, with Kevin O'Connell running the offense, Brian Flores coaching up that defense. Everybody wants to make it up to be Brian Flores is overachieving with that defensive unit to some degree, sure, but I also just don't think that people realize how talented this Vikings team actually is on defense. Their number one priority this past offseason was to acquire more playmakers in that front 7 for Minnesota, which is exactly what they did with Blake Cashman, Jonathan Grenard, and Andrew Van Ginkel. And they're at a point now where they can play through their front 7. They can cause havoc, and that's what we're seeing up to this point in the year. Now, does Sam Darnold ever come back down to earth? We will see, but again, couldn't really knock the Vikings any further down here because I think that they are a legitimately very well-rounded roster that doesn't have any sort of glaring shortcomings outside of maybe that quarterback position. But with how Darnold is playing, had to put them up here. Number 3, I have the Detroit Lions. My issue with the Lions is they really haven't looked all that great up to this point, to the point where I almost put the Vikings in front of them. But I kind of just have to trust my gut here, and I think that the Lions are one of the best teams in the NFL, where maybe you can point to the secondary as a little bit more of a point of weakness. I think that they will ultimately be fine, and that defense is still ultimately very well operating. We saw that this past weekend against the Cardinals, who are they didn't make this list, but they were definitely right on the fringe as well. I've been in on the Cardinals headed into this season. I have them as a playoff team. I think that was a really good win for the Lions this past weekend. Still a little bit worried maybe about the play of Jared Goff early on in this season, and that's fair. If you want to put the Vikings in front of them, I can fully understand why, but in my heart of hearts, I think that the Lions are a better team. I think they are one of the contenders out of the NFC, and I think that they are going to sort of return to form very shortly. Number 2, I have the Buffalo Bills, and this is sort of the most contested. Should the Bills be number 2 or number 1? They are playing like the best team in football right now. So if you want to have them as the number 1 team, again, I fully understand why, because they have been excellent up to this point. But I do feel like this is a situation where you are relying so heavily right now on Sean McDermott and some of these unproven defensive players to be able to shut down opposing offenses. I mean, they've been dominant so far in doing so, and Josh Allen is playing like the best player in football right now as he is taking the lead in that MVP race. But that being said, I feel like with a certain team that's in front of them, it's possible for them to get gashed in the secondary, that some of their weaknesses could sort of start to, return to form. Dorian Williams has been an excellent fill-in at linebacker right now as they're without Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano, their top 2 linebackers. And I just think the weaknesses along the defense are enough to sort of knock them down just one spot here. Because number 1, I just can't go any other direction than the Kansas City Chiefs. And again, if you want to go with the Bills, I totally understand why. They are playing like the best team in football. Who do I think is the best team in football? It's still the Chiefs. They have 3 wins against 3 teams that are supposed to be prevalent playoff contenders. Now listen, I know the Bengals are 0-3 right now, so maybe it's their reputation that's carrying them. I still think the Bengals are a good team. Falcons, I don't think they're a great team. I think they're a tough team, and going on the road and pulling out that game is a good one, even if it was the Falcons throwing up on themselves a little bit. The Chiefs find a way to win. It's what they've always done. If you want to talk about refs or that they could be, 1-2, I hear you. We don't really play hypotheticals on this show. And until anybody knocks off the Chiefs, I'm just going to have them be the number one team. And I'm not going to say that, the Bills, it's possible for them to, make a case and take that spot from them if the concerns with the Chiefs continue on. But I still feel like they are overall a very well-rounded roster and that they are the best team in the league. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section as we are going to move on here. And when we come back on the other side, we are going to be diving into the fantasy football landscape coming into week 4. We'll talk about my favorite starts of the week and explain why. So we are going to dive into that. But before we do so, we're going to take a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.